Now we're going to compare two specific enzymes that are responsible for the first rate determining step of glycolysis, right? So you've seen hexokinase before and you've seen glucokinase before. Now we want to compare the two and see what the difference is. So hexokinase is prevalent in high abundance in majority of our tissue. So majority of our tissue have a high presence of this hexokinase. Glucokinase, however, is highly prevalent in the liver. Okay. Now we want to look at the actual enzymatic activity of the two. Hexokinase has a very low Km. So you remember from metabolic biochemistry, low Km is a great indicator of high affinity, right? So the probability of saturation requires a very low concentration. So hexokinase can utilize glucose at very low concentration. However, because of this low Km, it also has a low Vmax. This Vmax indicates capacity, right? So there's only, when there's a presence of only very low amounts of glucose, hexokinase would be the more reliable use of the enzyme. However, if there is a high abundance, because of this very low Vmax, right, the higher possibility of saturation, right, taking place at a lower amount, this hexokinase would not be really prevalent on a use for any kind of mobility, right? So hexokinase, again, is used during a state of very low glucose or hypoglycemia. So instances of hypoglycemia would be very prevalent. And so hypoglycemia is what? So hypoglycemia is low blood sugar, right? And so now when we look here at glucokinase, so a specific enzyme that is prevalent in liver, right? So remember the first determining, both of these are responsible for the phosphorylation of glucose. So from glucose going into G6P or glucose 6-phosphate with the help of one of these enzymes with the utilization of ATP, right? So liver, however, is the opposite. It has a very high Km. So what does that mean, high Km? So what that means is high Km is an indicator that even though it has a very low affinity to glucose, however, because of this high Km, the actual capacity, the Vmax, is actually very high. So this glucokinase is more active and more prevalent and more useful during instances of hyperglycemia, right? So if you have, for example, during a fed state and you're eating whatever, your tacos or your burritos or your kebabs or whatever you want to eat, okay? And you have a high abundance of carbohydrates, glucokinase becomes a more efficient form of actually utilizing this phosphorylation procedure, right? So hypoglycemia, or maybe here we can look at it as more of a fasted state, whereas this other enzyme, glucokinase, is more at a fed state, usually during a high carbohydrate diet, right? So fed, let's put some quotes here to make it look a little fancy. Yeah. And so that's the basic comparison of the two.